Not everyone is naturally funny, and that's exactly why many speakers avoid humor. But on today's show, we're talking about how humor can be learned, taught, used intentionally by presenters who think it's just not in their DNA. And we got a guest who combines performance training, improv techniques, and research backed communication skills to help everyday speakers become more engaging, clear, and when it fits, their own kind of funny, all without trying to pretend to be someone that they're not. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Frankie Kemp, is a head honcho at frankiekemp.com. She ran an acting school before becoming a TV director and scriptwriter for a Eurovision Song Contest, and also an award winning storyteller, actor, and playwright. Now I'm going to let her take it from here because she'll do a better job at telling you her journey than I will. So, Frankie, welcome to the show. Been looking forward to it. Tell us how we got here.
Right, Rob. Firstly, I love that intro because it is about using humor when and if it fits. But before we go on to that, you wanted to know about me, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I my origin story. I mean, we all have several, don't we, really?
Yes.
So this is one version, is that I left drama school and I was doing loads of fringe stuff, which basically means voluntary work with a script. And I was catapulting between that and basically temping. And I thought, right, I've had enough of this, and ended up setting up an acting school, which took off in quite a major way in London. And within 5 years, I went from 15 kids in a scout hut to 200 people, including the adults, because what was happening was that my whole ethos was that it wasn't about teaching children to learn lines or Stanislavski or whatever, although, yeah, we did that, but it was really about giving confidence, creativity, and communication skills. So people could see their children blossoming. And because of that, they went, right, we want the same thing. And then I would be involved in, I'm doing a speech in the UN. Could you write my speech for me? And then could you rehearse me? And then I started to go down this lane where I was looking at communication skills for adults. But then 5 years on, I got itchy feet, sold the school, and those were the days where you could put an advert in the newspaper and sell a school. It's brilliant. But I was very upset, gave my babies away. But then I went off to Turkey, and in Turkey, again, communications training. And then because I was learning Turkish, and because I looked like this, it was a bit of a novelty. As soon as I opened my mouth, they were like, "Oh, what? Are you Turkish? Are you married to a Turk? What happened?" So, and then I ended up meeting a bloke in a bar, and then directing at the Eurovision Song Contest, because that's what life does. It
Right.
kind of throws me curveballs, because I find that when I'm just kind of like open, things happen. It's very strange. Doesn't it happened to me, but I chose it to. And it was absolutely brilliant. And there were many skills that I learnt from that, including directorial skills. In Turkey involves a certain type of communication style that might not go down so well here. Um, but it was really educational and I loved it, because then I thought, right, I'm going to do a bit more script writing. So I started to write plays and books to help children learn English or help children learn the national curriculum when I came back to England. And I wrote sets of plays, and they were comedies to help kids learn about history. Um, because it's kinesthetic, it's about getting up and doing and living and laughing and inserting them into history because I love history. And then while I was doing that, I trained in neuro-linguistic programming, and I joined a company in which they were only looking for actors to teach communication. So at that time, I got into improv quite heavily. So I was doing a lot of improv, and I was in all these troupes, and I was writing these scripts, and this company said, come and teach people communication. They're all in business and they really need your skills. And using that and my NLP and my improv, and I do geek out a little bit on science. So if you've seen my blog, you've referred to my blog, it's research backed because I work with people in pharma, in agriculture, in engineering. And what I realized was that one of the ways that I can become that what I give them lands it more, how can I say, less judgmentally. I mean, they're not judgmental actually, but to land more openly is by giving them the science, is the science. But humor, which is what we discussed at great length, is
Mm-hmm.
another fantastic tool when you use it well and within the frame of your personality,
Right.
i.e., don't try and be a one-liner Joan Rivers stand-up comedian. I wouldn't, in fact, even if you were that person and you had that ability, that is pretty tricky ground because that's not why they are paying you. You're not an after-dinner speaker. But the point here is about humor being used for managers, used in HR, in learning, with your peers, with colleagues. It is a tool for life, and it can help you survive the ups and downs of it.
Well, all right, so let's unpack that a little bit. That's some
Mm.
story, by the way. Next time I'm going to ask you, what haven't you done? It'll be a little shorter, I believe, because you really have been all over the place. All right, so you had me at hello. We did Frankie and I met about a month or two ago, and we were sort of talking about getting on the show, and I was really intrigued by something that I'd never heard anybody take a stand like you did. I'm a guy who has always felt if it's natural, go ahead and use humor. But if not, I substitute the words. Don't worry about the humor. We're just going to make it interesting, not necessarily funny. But you go out and if I'm misusing your words, just let me know. I want you to convince me a little bit because you take a stronger stand than I do. You seem to think that humor, as long as we apply it appropriately to someone's style, not one size fits all. But humor can be learned by many people, even if it doesn't come naturally to them. Convince me of that, because that's new to me.
Well, can I peel back first, Rob, as to why we need to use humor?
Sure.
Right. So I'm going to peel back and then we can look at what humor is. So a lot of people think that they're not funny or that humor is inappropriate. And so it does feel a bit tricky, but let's just talk about why you would need to use humor in the first place. One of the easiest ways of being humorous is simply to take a shared experience and then people laugh because they go, oh, yeah, that's happened to me. Right now, here, the humor is not about being funny, it's about connecting, and it's about empathy. So when you describe a situation, I think I was talking to somebody the other day about how we treat serving servers in restaurants and how my dad would never think, and in the 70s and 80s, to do this, hail a taxi. was just normal.
Right.
And we were all laughing because a lot of us had done these jobs earlier on in our lives. And it was like, oh my God, it was like, and we laugh because we've all been there. That's humor, right? It's one of the easiest ways to introduce humor is you take a situation that everybody's been through and you replay it back. And what that does is it creates empathy and understanding. Okay, so that's on the very basic level for
Okay.
humor.
Okay.
Now, the other great thing about humor is it gives you the ability to lower defensiveness, lower the other person's defensiveness. So there was a study at the Harvard Mahoney Neuroscience Labs, and what they realized was that after a joke, there's this crackle of neurotransmitters that get released, I mean, flooded into the brain, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. I mean, that is a drug high, totally legal and free. Yay. So, if you've got that lowers the defensiveness of people you're speaking to. And the other thing about humor is if you're in a situation that feels really tough, humor at the right moment, when it's introduced at the right moment, can make it less painful. It takes you out. It objectifies rather than subjectifies. There's a distancing that goes on. So to give you an example, if I'm working with a client on communication, and I have known it with both men and women who will have meltdowns about what they're going through. Now, I'm not going to go in with a one-liner immediately. Maybe not even at all, because it really depends on the person and the situation. It's organic. But it might be there comes a time where there's a natural leaning towards a joke. And what happens is invariably the person laughs and then they go into a sort of different gear where they analyze or they look for solutions because they're not in it anymore. They're standing on the side, which allows them to take a different view and to deal with it.
Yeah. But
That's what
But
humor
Frankie,
really
let
helps
me
you.
cut in on you a little bit. All right,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Believe me, I know I see the value of humor. You doesn't matter. We're on a show now. Everybody listening sees and hears the value of humor. No argument. But I want to push back and get you on that. Get a definitive response. I'm going to put you on the Frankie 30-second clock in a minute. Okay. In 30 seconds or less, I would like you to answer the question, not why is humor so powerful? It is amazing in so many different ways. But can anybody be funny?
Yes.
Okay,
There we are.
tell
I'm
me
not on the
why.
naughty chair anymore, am I, Rob?
You're
Yes.
still on the clock. Yes. Go ahead. So they can, but and let me give you my version of your answer, and then tell me if I'm wrong or right. I'm assuming you're saying that because, as you said, we're not talking about one-liners or, a funny thing happened to me on the way to the bakery today. We're talking about maybe reacting to things around us. So, would it be safe for me to say that yes, as long as they find their particular style of humor that fits them naturally?
Yes. And you know what you've just said about looking at your environment and using that. So I was training somebody the other day, and he has to give this he does this 100-day presentation to the CEO and his manager, who's very critical, and the head of HR. And what we realized was, funnily enough, I'll change the names, but he's called Brian. One of the managers is called Ben, and the other one is called Bill. And so I just went, so it's not your 20 years in the nuclear industry, it's the fact that your name begins with B. And he just roared with laughter. Obviously, it's you're not, but that's to do with context and timing. And he said, "Oh my God, maybe I could use that." And I said, "Yeah, but maybe you couldn't, because it depends on whether you're nervous or not.
Yeah.
Because if you're, really nervous, then don't do it. Don't do it at that point. Because if you, humor often depends on timing, and it could sound awkward. So we'll use another one. We'll use something else. But if you feel confident enough, then use it. I mean, I was reading this book, which is called, actually, I won't say what it's called, but it was directed towards messaging for introverts. And it said to relax at the beginning of a presentation, an introvert should crack a joke. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's like saying, if you want to relax when you're walking in the park, try and find a landmine.
yeah. Here's the opposite way to relax. Maybe tell a story, but I don't know where the why we have to force a joke. In 40 years on stage, I don't believe I've ever told a joke. And yet people find me very funny on stage because my form of humor is not joke telling. My form of humor is similar to what you described, which is to react to things that are happening in real time. And now there are areas. All right, nobody listen. I'm just talking to Frankie for a moment. Yes, there are areas where I know that there's some humorous things I can add in, but they're not jokes per se. They're just
No.
areas of the material that I know we can probably find some humor in. But there's so many people in what you just described that would make me nervous to have to start with something funny. And particularly if we lose them on that first joke, right? Oops.
Well, that's it, isn't it? If you
Yeah.
lose them on the first joke, then it feels like you've lost the game. It's
Hmm.
really difficult to come back from that unless you've done a stand-up comedy course. I mean, it's a different set of skills.
Yeah. Yeah. My son is a stand up comic. He's the comedian in the family. I don't tell jokes, I just
He
make
gets
people
it from
laugh.
you, Rob.
Well, you're absolutely, I don't want to say
Well,
yes or no, but
well,
I'm blinking twice if it's yes. All right. You'll have to watch this one on video, folks. Frankie, if humor can be taught, as you say, give me some building blocks
yeah.
because I think you've got particularly your typical introvert or just somebody who doesn't do this for a living is going to be a little bit, I'm not even fond of the word nervous. They're going to be anxious about this. Okay. So is there a process that you can teach?
Yeah, well, when I'm working with people, one of the things that we do is, well, we're looking at the message. Firstly, you look at the message, and then you can look at certain messages gear themselves to certain types of humor. So I'll give you some examples. Something that I heard in a very technical and potentially dry situation, which was agriculture. And I'm just pausing because I think you're going to have to edit this. Oh, hang on. Right. So the this was something that somebody said where they said managing manure for sustainable farming is like curating perfume. Balance, precision, and just the right microbial breakdown makes the difference between something that's good to be around and something that clears the room. And somebody came up with that in a presentation. And I think the reason why it worked is because you're taking, so if I was to break this down, you take the qualities of what you're describing. So here it was sustainable farming. And then the analogy is perfume, something also where we're talking about manure, we're talking about perfume, but actually they go through a very similar process. So there's a truth in it that makes you laugh because you're like, oh my gosh, that's true. But it's also so absurd because you would never usually see the juxtaposition of that it makes you laugh. So somebody actually came up with that by themselves. It was easy for them to come up with it after we'd worked on why, who are you speaking to? Why are you speaking? And what are you wanting them to do as a result of that? And then they were able to go, right, this is my message, and this is how I'm going to gear it to these people. It's about this thing, and I need an analogy. And somebody said perfume, and they went, oh, hang on, how would that work? And they were actually thinking in a very scientific way. And when we all heard it, it was like it made us laugh because it works, and yet it's such an absurd comparison.
Yeah, I agree. And the weird part is, for me at least, that I think many speakers are afraid of trying to be funny because they're afraid that they're going to risk being embarrassed, uh,
Yes.
or maybe their credibility will be shot. And I have a response to that, but you're my guest. I'd love to hear your response. If I said that to you, if I said I want to do it, but I've tried it once or twice before, and
Mm.
I didn't get the reaction I was looking for, and it really threw me. I'm nervous about taking the risk. What would you tell them?
Well, I would ask them first what they tried before.
Good.
It's
Yeah.
like, well,
Good
what did you
idea.
try?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who did you try it with?
Right.
How did you feel before you opened your mouth? Because if there's any uncertainty before you opened your mouth, then that was your message. Your body's telling you, nah,
Right.
don't do it.
Right.
Do it.
Yeah.
Not the
No.
right electricity in
Yeah.
this gathering, not the right time.
That's
So,
really a good point, Frankie, because I'm glad you brought that up because I do think that some people they want to be half pregnant. They want to half step into that humor. You know what I mean? So they're delivering the line, but because of the fear of embarrassment, they're kind of holding back on the pitch and the punch. And what is more important, the timing, I can't think of. You've already said that, but when you said that, I went, hello, because a lot
yeah.
of it is timing. But when you hold back, and you just basically are just spitting out words. I always push them to kind of old Johnny Carson or some of the talk show hosts, and
Yeah.
remind them that the funniest moments of the monologue, the funniest moments of their humor, is frequently not the joke. It's reacting to the response from the joke.
So Graham Norton does that all the
Uh
time.
huh. Right.
So I saw, oh, I can't remember the name of the actor. I absolutely adore him. But anyway, he was interviewing, but he was interviewing the other interviewees. And
Hmm.
Graham was like, I think I'm out of a job here. Just do your thing, just do your thing like this. And it just made everybody laugh because he's just pointing out what's already there, the absurdity of the situation. He's showing the situation. It's unusual. He says it, people laugh. There's a recognition. Now, you said, and it made me hoot with laughter, you can't be half pregnant. But it was such an accurate analogy. So that completely coincides with what I've said, dovetails with what I've said,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because it is appropriate to the message. You're not shoehorning it in. So I will work with IT people who are very dry, and they will come out with analogies which just make me laugh because I just think, why did you equate that to house painting? And they go, well, is this wrong? And I go, no, it works completely. And it's just made me laugh because I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And sometimes just because it's unexpected. So if you take like the old silent movies, they would work on unpredictability, which is what they call a false syllogism in logic. So two people walking down the road, two people walking down the road, and then suddenly Lauren and Hardy, one of them falls into a hole. We all think it's hilarious, right? I remember when my auntie, well, she was about, I don't know, 90 odd at the time, and she told me this story when I was little. She was walking around, my auntie Minnie walking down the road, and she's talking to Auntie Sissy, and she thinks Auntie Sissy has fallen behind her, and she's carrying on. She says, so we go to the furriers now, and she can't. So suddenly she's like, here's a little squeal. and it's below the pavement. Auntie Sissy has fallen down a drain.
Oh my God. This is your humor, Frankie?
Thank God she was all
Right.
right. But it just, the image is so absurd. I
Right.
can just see them walking down the road. So we're going to the furrier?
Right. See, I would
It's
put a
just,
caption under that, Frank, that says, "This is what it looks like when you lose your audience." Right? Down a hole.
that's exactly it. There we are. No, I'm laughing because it's completely accurate.
Right. You know, I think the this concept of putting one toe in the water and sort of half going for it is a mistake we'd like to weed out. What would be another mistake you think people make when they're trying to incorporate humor and but they can walk into another issue if they're not careful? What would be another problem they'd want to avoid?
Okay. When something is so grave that humor is completely inappropriate.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can mention this on your podcast, but
Well,
last
I'll tell you
night I
what,
said,
let's not, because there's a lot of grave things going on, and I think your point is
at the White
made.
House last night, for
Yeah,
example,
it
like why
rhymes
it's not
with
funny.
it rhymes with slight mouse. Okay, so but we'll leave that one alone. Suffice to say, classic example and a common mistake, I believe, by that particular speaker of incorporating humor that actually moves markets and changes lives in a very dangerous way. I'm with you. As a speaker, so let's bring it down to our level. Even bringing that up uh, can become an issue because I don't care if 90% of the audience finds a particular joke funny. That 10% that's offended in the speaking world, those are the ones who take it to corporate. Those are the ones that go to the CEO.
You
Those can
don't
be
want to do, no,
very
it's too
serious.
much of a risk, Rob.
Right.
It really is. And I think this is one of the problems that, okay, I, firstly, funny, to be funny, you're doing it for a laugh. Humor is to drive a point home.
Hmm.
And humor is often a byproduct. It's not something you're going to go for. Humor is a byproduct of something that is, as we've discussed and shown, unexpected, absurd, yet true,
Right.
or something that we recognize. Three forms of humor that you can do without having to be funny. So I'm just now grouping together what we've done.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
That's you're doing my job for me. Thank you. Appreciate that.
yes, well, Rob, don't slack off. Um,
How dare
so,
you? The humor is flying, folks. Hey,
well, the
Frank.
sarcasm is,
Right.
oh, that's the thing, right? So coming back to your point,
Yeah.
okay, I'm playing around with you. I'm being quite sarcastic.
Right.
However, that's very cultural. Number
Hmm.
one. Number two, let's just take sarcasm for a start. So some people will say something which they think is really witty, very dry and sarcastic in a message, Slack message. But unfortunately, that really relies on a great deal of trust in the person who's sending the message. Also, non-verbals, such as that twinkle in the eye, the wry smile. And if you don't have those non-verbal cues, I don't see you coming with good intentions to me. I'm going to read that and I'm going to think, who the hell are you to say
Right.
this?
Right.
So, firstly, that's to do with the way the humor is being delivered. So, there's no non-verbals there. But when there is, it might be completely inappropriate to the occasion.
Right.
Um, you have a grave, serious situation in which people might be worried about their jobs, the environment, whatever. And I have heard people say, go in with humor, it will relax, and then let your serious message drop. And I think that is a really good guide because of the hormonal cocktail that I told you about. but it's also dangerous in certain situations. To lead with like, to lead in that way is the reverse of what people need in very grave moments. They want you to recognize their pain,
Right. Right.
and you need to build that trust and connection than rather than going in with and then the serious message, because they're not up for it.
Yeah. And Frankie, I don't even think that has to be a grave message. I think, listen, you're comfortable with humor. I'm comfortable with humor.
Mm,
But most people who use humor, it's just one of the elements. And so I'm actually, when I'm coaching people frequently, trying to get them to stop worrying about hammering the crowd and winning the crowd in the first 3 minutes. We'll bring that crowd to us, give them some time. Because when it feels forced to the audience, and we've discussed this, it's tough to back up and then come at him again. It feels artificial. You're losing your authenticity. So let's go up there and be authentic. As I said, let's be interesting. Let's not put so much pressure on ourselves
yeah.
to immediately be funny and teach this audience how hysterical we are. Let's get them interested in our message and then ease that humor in. Unless, that is your calling card. But we're talking about 10% of the speakers that are really leaning on humor that heavily. In the training world, Frankie, you can lose contracts by being too funny.
Yeah.
You're. Listen, I always tell people, I'm going to be motivational, I'm going to be inspirational, I'm going to be entertaining, but that's the easy part. I'm here to bring information, and but I will incorporate those other elements. At the end of the day, that's my job, is to teach frequently, and I'm talking to trainers and even professional speakers delivering keynotes. Unless you are the dinner speaker, and go ahead, join the magicians, and then there's plenty of entertainers there. But that's not really the professional speaking circuit that we're talking about.
It's not, but actually, you remind me of I was doing a keynote for the Charity IT Leaders Annual Conference, and they did this really brave thing before dinner on the last night. So somebody stood up and he said, right, I'm going to share an IT disaster story that I have encountered in my career. Now, everybody was very careful that they didn't choose anything that was a recent disaster. But it was so interesting watching people, because I love to study humor and I love working out why people are laughing. But the common response to all these stories was this: at the same time, people would do this like that.
Right,
It was so interesting. Like, why are you putting your head in your hand and laughing at the same time? Because you're thinking, thank God it wasn't me, but oh my God, what if it was? Ah, hence the
right,
body language.
right,
That's humorous, but not because they're trying to be funny. They're just sharing these awful disasters,
right. Yeah, makes
but they
sense.
weren't life threatening, thank God.
Right.
Otherwise, that's
Yeah,
not worth
that
the time.
life threatening and humor in the same sentence, kind of an oxymoron. All right, I've got one more question for you. If someone was listening right now
Mm.
and they've avoided humor their entire career, and some of these are people that I'm coaching, what's one
They're
practical
long
way? You did a
days.
great job of summarizing. Yeah, I want you to do more work for me. I mean, I want you to answer this question for me. What's one practical way they could begin experimenting with it after hearing the conversation that we've had? Just give me one, and a nice shorty here.
Well, usually I speak to people in engineering, pharma, tech. And I say, if you want to speak to mixed audiences, come up with an analogy. Analogies are wonderful. Now, once you come up with an analogy, it makes people go, oh, I never thought about it like that. Love,
Yeah,
right? One easy way of doing it, because it's the extraordinariness of the manure in the perfume, for example. Or the other one you could do is exaggeration. You take something that is um, fairly run of run of the mill, and you think of, for example, there was, what was that? I can't remember the comedy with John Malkovich, and what they're doing is they're setting off a there's a rocket launch, and there's a guy on the main computer, and Microsoft decides to do an update, and it was hilarious. I've got it on my blog.
Might be
And
Space Force, by the way. I'm trying to
yes,
think.
it was. It was
Yeah,
Space Force. And
right,
you're like, oh my God, that is so true. So what this leads me on to is this. You don't think that you're humorous. Forget funny. You don't think you're humorous. Borrow it, right? Find it. It's not even a tweet. What is it now? So you find it or something, or an Instagram thing, or a TikTok thing, and make your point through somebody else's humor. Use a cartoon. You don't have to be funny. What you do is you delegate out the humor to
right,
whatever resources you have.
right,
And you know what? It's like you're funny because you're showing us this situation using those tools.
right.
It's one of the easiest ways to do it.
What an outstanding idea, Frankie. Thank you for that. And I'll give you a little byproduct because I've started with videos. It will also let you know whether you're crazy or not. And I say, let me explain. Sometimes, you hit the stage and you're not sure. Wrote an article once that said, is it the audience or is it me? Sometimes I don't know who's off right now, but there isn't a whole lot of noise going on. When you show
Yeah.
a video clip to start, the video clip never has a bad day. It didn't get in a fight with its wife or husband. It's always the same. And yet, with one audience, they may be on the floor laughing, and another audience pretty quiet. It's not to freak people out. It's to let you know you just took a temperature read, an accurate temperature read of your audience. Because if it's just you and me, Frankie, telling a story, well, maybe I didn't punch it up the way I normally do. I'm still
Yeah.
not sure if that was me or them. But when I show
Yeah.
a clip that I know works and it's kind of not working and I set it up properly, it doesn't freak me out. It just says, okay, throttle down a little bit, not up. I don't have to get aggressive towards this audience, but understand that it's going to take a little while longer to get up this hill, but we're going to get there. And there are different parts, for instance, in the US, there are different regions. I don't want to call out a region like the Midwest, for instance, so I'm not, but it could be there where they're just a little lower reacting. Okay. And that's okay. That's
I
okay.
hear you. Yes.
All
They
right.
are. It's very different humor. I mean, I know that my sarcasm would fall completely flat in certain parts of America, so I
Oh,
have to
yeah.
rein it in because it's very literal.
Right.
But
Right. Right. All right, Frankie, just wonderful. We could go on for another half hour on this. Tell me how people get a hold of you.
well, if you go on to frankiekemp.com, that's how to get hold of me. I've
Hmm.
also got weekly blog posts and videos. And if you also go on to tips and tools, which is the blog, and look up humor, there's 9 ways to be funny. No, correction, to use humor. Forget
Yes.
funny, to use humor. And once you look at them, you'll go, oh, God, I can do that. And if you want to do a lot more, i.e., become a communication ninja, just contact me.
Yeah. On LinkedIn too. I found you on LinkedIn. And
Yes.
yep. And one other thing that I'm leaving with, just so you know, when I said convince me, I don't know if I agree with you. You did something very interesting. You fixed the words that I was using. I kept saying, "You're telling me anyone can be funny," and you keep rebalancing this with, "No, not really. I'm telling you, anybody can use humor." Okay, and there's a difference between those two statements. So that's one of the things I'm walking away with because I happen to agree with that statement. We have to find the right humor, where to place the humor. We have to read that on.
Mhm.
I got it. But I can get behind that. When we say, just make me funny, because I had some CEOs at Xerox when I was 25, 30 years old. They were sending me up there and they would use the words, hello, I need you to make me funny. And it would be like, and I think that's where the scar tissue formed, Frankie, because it was, difficult and my job depended on it. In any case, I love the way we've kind of remanaged those words. And I think for anyone who's listening right now, that's a little bit more comfortable to hear it presented that way. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for being on the show. Just terrific. I enjoy talking to you, whether the microphone's on or off, by the way. But I'm glad others got to be able to hear this. So thank you.
Thank you, Rob. It's been so. I mean, I just it's a great fun subject. If it wasn't,
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
be a bit ironic, wouldn't it?
How
And
do
it's
you
great
how do
to
you
talk
screw up
with you
humor?
about it because you're naturally funny as well.
Right.
When I say
Well,
as well, I mean as well as the subject, not as well as me. I'm
well,
humble.
no, I think I'm just a little high, a little more funny than you, but that's not a big deal. All right. Anyway, cut her mic, Larry. Cut
And
her
I'm more
mic.
humble as
Yeah,
well, he
cut her
said.
mic, Bill. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Rob.
You bet. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody, and we'll do it almost as funny. Until then, stay safe. As she poses.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.